Good afternoon, everybody. It is a pleasure to resume our symposium activities related to energy generation in tropical areas and considering the threats and the management programs that could be undertaken. Yesterday, we were sharing the management strategies that are developed along those rivers that have dams. Today, we will be talking with one of the most common strategies used by environmental agencies to compensate the reduction of fish stocking. So our symposium is about stocking. These are the entities that are funding and organizing these symposiums, the ones that were developed this week. Hector Vera and I will be coordinating or leading today's session. Today, we have the great pleasure to have with us Professor Angelo Agostinho. He is a professor of the Maringa University. He has a bachelor in biological sciences. He has a master's degree in zoology in the Federal University of Paraná. He is a doctor in ecology and natural resources from the Federal University of San Carlos. He is an expert. He's an expert on dam dynamics. He has over 300 publications and 17,000 citations. He is an authority in terms of dams and reservoirs. It is a great opportunity to have Angelo here with us. We want to capitalize on this so we can all celebrate Angelo's presence. This is a greeting from a friend of ours, Miguel Perez. He is a very good friend of Angelo's, and today we would like to pay homage to Angelo. Surprise! He is a person who's been walking us through building knowledge around dams, and those of us who've had the opportunity to be in Brazil and learning from his experience know what I'm talking about. So later on, I will be sending you this message.
Bom dia, boa tarde, boa noite. Eu sou Miguel Petreri, aqui do Brasil.
I'm sorry, but this message is in Portuguese.
Bom dia, boa tarde, boa noite. Eu sou Miguel Petreri, aqui do Brasil. Eu sou amigo do Angelo Agostinho desde 1985. A gente tem trabalhado junto desde essa época e a gente tem uma admiração muito grande pelo Angelo. Eu considero o Angelo o maior ecólogo de represa tropical do mundo. Eu estou sempre aprendendo com ele, sempre ouvindo as opiniões dele, que são muito abalizadas. Aprendo tanto conversando com ele, como lendo os artigos dele, os livros dele. Ele é uma pessoa muito importante como um cientista brasileiro, um excelente colega, formador de gente, um ótimo pai de família, um excelente amigo. É isso que eu posso falar do meu querido amigo Angelo Agostinho.
Professor Angelo, he created the Nupelia Science Institute. He has a specialization in aquaculture and ichthyology. He also contributed to the PhD program and the master's degree program of ichthyology. and freshwater ecology. He was also a member of the selecting committee of the PhD program of comparative biology. He has been working with dams, especially in Itaipu. He started with his work by rescuing fish. He also worked in Electrobras and the Academic Excellence Project in CMPK. He is a member of the consulting committee in Argentina. He's been a professor at different universities in Brazil and in other countries. He is a very productive man with over 300 papers. And as I mentioned at the beginning, he is an excellent and a great human being. He always wants to help and contribute. Very cooperative. So here, it is a pleasure for everybody to have you here in our country, here in Colombia, because we know that your contributions will be essential to help the rivers. Professor, welcome. Very well. Let's continue. Today we have several presentations. First, we will have a lecture by Angelo Agostinho. Then we will hear the experience in China in the Yangtze River with the conservation of Asipenser. Then we will hear the experience that we've had here in Colombia with the knowledge provided by genetics of indigenous species and the consequences of restocking or fish stocking. Then we will hear the presentation by some of the teams that works with stocking, with fish stocking. And we will be ending the session with the experience in Chile by Professor Evelyn. With no further ado, we'll start with Angelo's presentation. I will share my screen now.
Good afternoon. I'd like to thanks again for the. I am not I am not expecting this, but it was good. Yeah, but then I thanks again the invitation. I appreciate very much to come here, and I thank the organization. I thank Luz and Sarah that has a lot of work to help me to stay here today. And I will talk a little about my experience in reservoir fish stocking in Brazil. And I could accompany several stocking during this time, and my perception is that doesn't work. Then my talk here will be about the deficiency of the stock in Brazil. We don't have a good experience. I don't know nothing. No stocking that works well in Brazil. Obviously, we have a problem with monitoring because people doesn't do monitoring. And during this time, more than, I think, I think more than 60 years, Brazil has been releasing fish in the reservoir in Brazil. Okay, then monitoring start recently. Doesn't have a long history of monitoring in Brazil. Monitoring is one of the most popular management strategy in Brazil. Yeah, the monitoring starts to be realized as an answer to the impact that impoundment promote. Okay, then we know that the reservoir has a enormous impact on the fish fauna. Yeah, especially some strategy of fish or fish of some strategy. They have a hard impact. In general, the impact is linked to the habitat change in habitat, especially in quality and availability. The biggest problem that I think that we have with impoundment is that our fish are not adapted to that environment. Our fish was evolved in a running water, in a fluvial system. In South America, especially in Brazil, we don't have large lake. We have floodplain lake, but not large lake that could permit the development of fish fauna pre-adapted to this new situation. Okay, then I think this is the biggest problem with conservation and fisheries also in reservoir. We don't have pre-adaptation to lacustrine nor pelagic habitat. Yeah, this lacustrine and pelagic habitat is the most conspicuous habitat in reservoir. Yeah, in reservoir. Impoundment then affect especially migratory fish, of course, because migratory fish has a wide home range, and in general, the critical habitat is far from them. The spawning occur in the end point of the migration, and the nursery is located 100 kilometers below the place of spawning. Then it's impossible to construct a dam without affect this strategy of fish of this strategy. Okay, then the barrier and honey water also, because the new condition, new habitat determine the fish that will occupy it. In general, the fish fauna from reservoir are composed essentially by opportunistic species, low size, smaller, and some species that has some pre-adaptation, like some cyanide that can reproduce in reservoir. In reservoir, they can produce because his eggs is so smaller, and development is quickly developed. The incubation is quickly, and the eggs has a oil drop that permit that they say. Then the species that can occupy the most conspicuous part of the one reservoir, in general, there's opportunity or have some adaptation. Most of them doesn't enter in the reservoir. And this, including this, is a problem because with fish passage, because the fish go out and to come back, go up and to come back, they need to pass by one environment lengthy. Then this is a problem. In Brazil, the effort of mitigation of the impact of the reservoir was focused in fish passage and fish stocking, and less importance in fishing control. Okay, essentially this was the action that was taken by company and by governmental agencies. Okay, then most of the effort was applied in this. But the great problem that we have, I mentioned it before, was the absence of monitoring during a long time. The methodology of monitoring also has problem, especially when you put one species that can reproduce in the environment. In this case, it's more complicated. You get good result with monitoring. Then the monitoring in general is weak, is poor, because the methodological problem that we have. But in some case, we have monitoring, we have control of fish stocking, but its database was in a drawer in the desk, but never found one with each other. This, I think this is because the result was not good and not could be considered. Yeah. Then this is a big problem also. Stocking with non-native fish was forbidden in 1990. Yeah, after Rio 92, after the Agent 21, was forbidding the introduction, the stocking, official stocking with non-native fish. But we will see that this is a common practice till today, okay? Unfortunately, this is the reality. Here we have, we did an inventory with the environmental manager of hydroelectric company, and about what they think about management, what the priority of management in their reservoir. Now we are talking about 100 reservoir. The main, most of people believe, almost more than 50%, believe that stocking is the solution. And the other important fraction is fish passage is the solution to mitigate impact of impoundment or to improve the fishery in the reservoir. Then other kind of management was not considered. Other kind of manage like habitat restoration, protection of the spawning place, and so was not too much considered. The restoration of fish fauna is the main. No, the restoration of the fish stock is the main target of the fish stocking. Okay, fish stocking want to restore in general, want to restore the fish stock. The restoration of the fisheries, but sometimes they use to preserve some population of fish also. Then the problem of that fish stocking search to resolve is linked to size, population size, or stock size, and genetic quality problem. In general, the purpose of the fish stocking is conservation of fisheries. In Brazil, this is the main reason. About conservation, the objective was promote an increase in size and genetic quality of the population. In general, applied to endangered species. But for fisheries, the objective was to increase the size of fish stock. Yeah? This kind of fish stock, we name it the name it is supplementation stock. Yeah, stock for supplementation, or maintain artificially the stock. In this case, maintenance. In the first situation, we have the fish population can be sustainable. They can reproduce in an environment, and for maintenance, it's do not occur. The fish cannot reproduce. Need to put and take fish continuously. Both are kind of fish stocking. Other term is exists for this to classify this fish stocking, like stocking for mitigation. In general, applied to when some mandatory action is needed to attenuate or compensate some impact, some damage produced in the environment. In general, fish kill, and the others. Stocking for restoration complementary to the other management activity. In general, the stocking for restoration demand that people knows the status of the stock, status of the fish stock, or status of the population. Then something is changed in the environment, and then the fish stocking occurs. in a complementary action. Introduction or addition release the fish of other place, other basin. Yeah, it's an introduction of a species. This is forbidden. That I told that is forbidden in Brazil. But the question, the basic question in fish stocking is carrying capacity. We cannot put more fish that if the environment cannot support more. In general, I think this analogy with a glass of water is good. You can put more fish only if you take fish out. If everything in the environment is continuously, yeah, no problem with the environment. If you take fish, it's possible to put more. Then the main condition to do an action of stocking is the overfishing. Overfishing is a good indicator. If you know that the stock is overfished, then it's possible to thinking about fish stocking. Okay? In general, we can use for overfishing. Other condition that is useful is the depletion of fish stock. Depletion not for fisheries, but by spawning area. Reduction of the spawning area is a good reason to apply this technique. Or massive mortality. Massive mortality can justify the fish stocking also. But in this case, you need to put that species that died, not other, because no sense to put, in general, this happen. The people, when fish kill occur, the mandatory, the legal mandatory is put fish, but any fish. This is a no sense reason. Okay, and genetic degradation also. Yeah, genetic degradation is more sophisticated fish stocking, but that is necessary also sometimes. But in reality, the real situation is the decisions are made based in less palatable criteria. In criteria not so good, like common sense. Common sense for fish stocking isn't a synonymous of good sense. Yeah, because people think that no problem to put fish in the environment. The result only could be good or no result, but not the bad could occur. Then this is not true. Common sense doesn't work in this situation. And common sense conduct the politician to improve this opportunity to get more vote or more. Then electoral interest is linked to most of the fish stocking in Brazil. a lot of. Mandatory by law, no, occur when you have some problem with mortality in turbine, or mortality in spillway, or some kind of mortality occur. The judges obligate the people to put fish again, but the problem is that not the same species, because in general, that species that died is not, we don't have a technology to produce the alevin. Then put other. You can worsen the situation in this way. And lack of information. In general, some introduction, some stocking are taken by ignorance, or the people doesn't know the results, doesn't know what will happen, but do not monitoring to see the result also. We did inventory. We did one student of my friend Pelicisi did one inventory in media, about all the media in the last 10 years in Brazil about stocking, fish stocking, and she found that occur in 10 years 905 events of stocking. In general, most of them in the last years, and three last years. Okay, most of the event of stocking. The proportion of native and non-native fish is not clear here. Oh, it's okay there. The proportion of native and non-native fish indicate that fish stock with non-native fish is present nowadays. A lot of people do this in Brazil, in spite of this is forbidden, but occur. The number of fish per event oscillated between 40,000 fish till 180,000 fish was for each event. Okay, then a lot of fish was released during this time. The number of the environment that received this fish was essentially lake and dam, Atlantic environment, about 71%. The region that receive more fish, or where fish is released, is the northeast of Brazil. This, they have a tradition to stock fish in açudes, or small reservoirs. And then almost a little less than 200 event was promoted in southeast of Brazil. Amazon North and the North and Midwest has is possible to understand this doesn't have so much event of fish stocking. In general, this stocking was done by public agency. It's not one activity. Some of them provide private company, especially hydroelectric company. Yeah, and partnership also was registered between the 905 event among this. The number of fish released is the same tendency that we found to the number of event. Okay, it's similar. This is the species that was used, main species that was used in this event that was inventoried by in this study. Here we can see that many species, 25 species, were used in the stocking program in the northeast of Brazil. 45 in southeast of Brazil, yeah, and 19 in south region. All of them has tilapia as one of the species. Carps, okay, and the others. The non-native fish in the north and Midwest was the species originated in one or another region. For example, Colossoma macropomum is a tambaqui, was stocked in Paraguay River. And Megaleporinus macrocephalus came from Midwest. Then they changed species essentially. Okay. And the number of species was very high that they use. Okay. We need to remember always that exotic species, non-native species or alien species cannot be used in stocking by law. But the fact occur. The result of this program, yeah, this is a result of program in Rio Tietê. So five large reservoirs in Rio Tietê developed during 14 years. They fish stocking in their reservoirs. And they monitored also the fish landing. We can see that the main species that they use to stocking doesn't appear in the fish landing. Okay, this is a big problem. 14 years putting fish and no result. The main species that are caught in this reservoir is non-native fish that was stocking before 90. Okay, then Plagiosum escamosíssimos, a cyanide, is the first one. Tilapia, and pavon or tucunaré. Yeah? 3 among 4 species are not native, that are fished by artisanal fisheries, artisanal and sportive, but here is artisanal. For sport fish is mainly tucunaré, cicla. Okay, then with this result, we can see that it didn't work. There are other examples in different parts of Brazil. In Rio Grande, we have, during many years, they put Opleas lacerde. And the many species in landing, in artisanal fisheries, was Opleas malabaricus that they never put. Then many others examples exist about this. The limitation for this, we believe that is large reservoir is not productive. It's difficult you obtain some response of the effort of stocking in a large reservoir. This paper is a classic paper of Quiroz, Argentinian research. It demonstrates about based on about 700 reservoir or Atlantic environment. They demonstrate that area is determinant to low yield, low production in a reservoir. Yeah, the 5 reservoir of São Paulo, the Tietê River, is indicated by the circle in blue. Okay, then it's not possible to. This is a limitation of the environment. They can produce more than the real production. Beside the weak pre-adaptation that we discussed to the new environment, has productivity in reservoirs is in general low, because the main part in the main new habitat in reservoir is pelagic zone, the open area. When reservoir increase, what increases is the open area of the reservoir. This area has low production. Yeah, this is data from the Itaipu. 1987, 5 years after the reservoir closed, the dam closed. And in blue light, we have 15 years after the dam formation. We observed here that almost biomass are located in the littoral zone of the reservoir. The large zone, the fish biomass is low, even in deep zone, except in the region in terms of the reservoir. But in deep zone and the large zone or in open area of the reservoir, the production is very low. Yeah, this tendency increase according the time. With the time, yeah, we can see the relation of the dark blue here, and here, and 10 years after in light blue, we can see that the difference increased with the time. Okay. Then, in fact, we have in reservoir the most evident area are the open area. Open area produce. Then we cannot calculate the number of olivine that we need to put in reservoir according to the area. No, because only the littoral zone can support something more. Okay. Other thing that is important to understand is that the spatial variation in reservoir, the gradient in reservoir. All large reservoir has a strong gradient in the upper part. Okay. The upper part of the reservoir, here is the Itaipu reservoir, okay? The Itaipu reservoir, the dam stay in this part, okay? This is in the inner part of the reservoir. This is the upper part of the reservoir. We can see that the species, this is almost 11, 12 years of landing, fishery landing a company was done an inventory of 10 or 11 years, and this is this figure summarizes this data. Okay, then we can see that migratory fish. Okay, migratory fish is that one with an arrow. Migratory fish occur essentially in the entrance of the reservoir. Okay, we can see here. This light blue is migratory fish. Okay. The inner part of the reservoir is occupied by non-migratory fish. Okay, then these are in fact the most productive area in the reservoir, especially large and long reservoir like Itaipu, is the transition zone. Yeah? Because transition zone, you have nutrients in the water column and have light. In opposition to the entrance of the reservoir that has restriction to light penetration, and the inner part of the reservoir that has the limitation of nutrient that stayed sedimentate, in the upper part of the reservoir. Yeah. Then we have here the situation explained by Quiroz also. This is for tropical, for tropical, this continuous line and tropical. Tropical zone, reservoir in tropical zone is A1 and A2 is reservoir in temperate zone. We can see that doesn't work the effort of fish stocking. Yeah, but we have answered response to this effort only if you have medium or small reservoir and you use fertilization. It's impossible in a big reservoir. Then we cannot obtain good results putting fish in reservoir that is so large. Other problem that we have that we need to consider, because it's not because doesn't work, no, that we don't use, but has impact, negative impact in some stocking, fish stocking. This impact in general is linked to all the process of production of the alevin. Yeah, you releasing of the alevin. The choice or the selection of the breeder is a problem. Yeah, we need to the breeder owner and from in other basin or in the same base, the same species, okay? Then or different basin. Then here we start the problem with the big problem with genetics. Then we have during the process of the production of the alevin or the fries, during this period we have problem with with low genetic quality of the spawner, yeah? Because you use few reproducers, then if you use few reproducers, we have problem here. And possible reproductive losses related to fish here. During the releasing, especially to select the environment to release, or to transport the fish, we can introduce non-native fish. You can introduce non-native organism, other organism. You can disseminate pathogen and parasite, and you can change the structure of the community. Okay, this is problem that can happen. Like this, failures in the identification of the target species, yeah? You can put other species. We cannot find piranha in several environments in Brazil, if not for difficulty to identify the species. Yeah, this is a official stocking. We stock the target species was Bacon urbinianus, but was introduced together Bacon willari. This is common happen in the stocking program in Brazil. Other thing is degradation of the native stock, inbreeding depression. Yeah, I think this will be better explained in the next presentation. But this is a big problem. Okay, this occur, yeah, when you have reduced breeding stock, or brood stock, or you don't have a renew of this stock. Okay. Other is outbreeding depression. It's a problem also. If you take a fish in Madeira River, Mamoré River, Guaporé River, when the temperature is from 28 to 31 degrees centigrade, and take this fish and release in Rio dos Sinos and south of Brazil, when the temperature is from 13 to 27. If you do this, this was done, yeah? If you do this, you can worsen the situation of the population and the environment that receives the fish. Okay, this is outbreeding depression is a problem also. Genetic degradation, hybridization, yeah, is a great problem also. Most of 40% of the individuals that we caught in High Paraná River are hybrid. Yeah, then this is a big problem. There are other studies in the San Francisco River that the natural species is disappearing another species. But the biggest problem in fish stocking, in my opinion, is domestication. It's impossible to avoid this. Yeah, obviously you can improve a little, but you change a natural process that fish migrate hundreds kilometers and spawning, and the eggs down drift to the lower part of the basin while occur the incubation, yeah, and in direction to the nursery area. It's very much different that we have a artificial process of the production of the. Then the pressure, the selective pressure is different. Then you worsen the quality of the stock, the natural stock with this. Yeah, know that in Canada, some river species lost the capacity of the production in natural environment. Other changes relate to the structure of the community. Yeah, inter-specific competition. You are putting fish there that rarely is the same size that the counterpart in the natural environment. Then is not unfair competition. Yeah. Or you competition in interspecific competition is expected also. We don't have a study about this, but really it's possible to compete. And predation, we have a study about this, where the small fish in a region of the reservoir was eliminated totally by cicla. Pavon, no? Then this has a big impact. And the sport fishing introduced stocking this fish in the river illegally, yeah, till now. We need a lot of information before thinking about stocking fish stocking. Yeah, we need information about the ecosystem, about with the species that are the target. Socio-economical is important also, because sometimes some species that is important for economy in a region are affected by the species that you put. Risk for conservation, obviously, yeah. The legislation also. If legislation was about non-native species, we have something difficult to explain. It's forbidden, but some region has law that permit. It's unbelievable. The national law do not permit exotic species to be introduced, but the local municipality protect tucunaré cicla, for example, and nothing is done. Some general recommendation about stocking is that we need to select the target species based on information. Without information, we don't know what species we can put. Yeah. Then we need to know if the stocking is necessary, is really necessary. Okay, and it's necessary the knowledge of the natural stock. Yeah? We need to know their status before decide about fishing stock. Production of the alevins or fingerling in hatchery dedicated only to stock, only to stocking. The biggest problem that we have about this is hatchery that produce fish for aquaculture that has other objective. The selection is done for another thing, and people buy fish in this place to stock. Other thing, formation of a genetically diverse and frequently renew bloodstock, okay, is necessary. A rigorous control of the associated fauna and pathogen, certainty based in local study about the stocking methodology. We need to know for that place, that region, what species, what size, where we will release, and how and when to release. It's necessary to know this before decide for this. And extensive knowledge about the biology of the target species. But mainly, we need mainly to know to monitoring the result of the fishing stock. Okay, there is a proposal about there is a proposal about how to decide what we need to decide, when we need to decide about fishing stocking. What theme is important for consideration? Yeah. Then there is there is also some ideal hatcheries. Yeah, that was proposed by Flag and Nash. Okay. Then in conclusion, we can say that fish stocking in Brazil doesn't work. It's a pity, but doesn't work, and I believe that the great responsibility is for absence of monitoring. If we don't monitoring, we don't know nothing about, we don't learn about the process, then we don't recommend the fish stocking, except for genetic reason, maybe. Okay. Sorry, my English is poor. I never talk almost 1 hour in English. Yeah, but we need to pass. I'd like to pass this information for you. Yeah, then we resolved to try to talk in English also. I think my Portuñol is better than my English, but okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Angelo. Thank you so much for your advice and your recommendation. Now we will have
Público que está tanto virtualmente como presencialmente. Hay preguntas en
questions from the audience here in the room and those that joined the call remotely.
We got a question here in the chat to the Professor Angelo. It is wonder, how is traceability regulated in Brazil?
Good question. I think we don't have this. This is a big problem there because we don't know, especially if the species is not a self-sustainable population. They don't know if the increase of fish was because a big flood or because they put the fish. It's impossible to know about this. No control. Obviously, you can do this with genetic, but this doesn't have this stability in Brazil.
Thanks, Professor. We got questions here from the room, so anyone can raise hand or just give me a sign. So we got a question here from Paulo Pompeu. The floor is yours.
Professor Angelo, thank you very much for your talk. And based in your experience, it feels that the fish stocking should be an exception and never the main conservation strategy. Do you agree with that, that only in some specific case, the fish stocking would be necessary? For instance, when you have an endangered species extirpated from one area and the cause of the extinction was solved, was eliminated, and then in that case, we would have a reason to try to put that species again in the environment. Do you consider that only in this very specific case, we should try fish stocking, and for the most case would be an exception?
Yeah, I think so. I agree with you. I think that stocking needs to be associated to the other kind of management. You need to change the environment to receive that fish that you are putting. People know that this is done in aquaculture. If you want to put more fish in a tank, you need to improve the food. You need to, the environment is the similar situation, because you need to improve the environment, to increase the carrying capacity or increase the biogenic capacity to put more fish in an environment, because the environment in general produce the maximum that they can produce. The environment control the situation. Then I think that's for conservation, for endangered species, is a good strategy for management. But you need to associate to other things, because if the species, the reason, the limitation of the endangered that lead a species to be endangered, this limitation you need to eliminate to get the results. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Professor. We got next questions here in the room. So you got a microphone to do it, or?
Okay. Angelo, I want to know if, based on your experience, and since the area of the reservoir is not a predictor to know how many fish do you want to stock in a reservoir? Do you think that a ratio between the littoral area or just littoral area development could be a good predictor?
I don't know. I never seen paper about this or some study about this, but I think it's a better predictor than consider all the area. Yeah? Because sometimes ago, once upon a time, in Brazil, was the people believed, the governmental agents believe that you can estimate the production of fish in Brazil taking the area of all reservoir. That's stupid, no sense, because in reservoir, only a part of the reservoir are productive. Then I think that if you consider only the littoral area, littoral zone, it's possible that this could be a better predictor.
Thank you, Professor. I got a question here. Talking about fishes and fish diversity in the context of stocking, why this is more seen like meat fish rather than wildlife, as is in other fields as terrestrial, for example? Why do you think this could be a failure in general sense of the public, a failure maybe in the administrators of maybe reservoirs or authorities, or of we biologists in communicating, and also other professionals as people working with stocking and using fish as veterinarians or fish engineering? So where is the failure in not saying fish biodiversity as wildlife? You think that is true, or is just something? Thank you.
That's a good question. I don't know why. because in general, the wild life is considered not because not voluntarily, but the environmental agents are worried about the conservation also. Then the action in general, the argument to some managed decision is conservation, not production for fisheries. Then I think in fact we have a worry about conservation, but it's not effective. But people in general, the population in general, the society, see more like fish for food. Yeah. Then I think all the situation that you mentioned, we are guilty about this also, because we couldn't explain exactly what happened, but people also, because the common sense is this, and politician also has responsibility of the real situation. Then I think I don't know if I respond.
Thank you, Professor, for giving your thoughts here. And Luz, we don't have more questions, so if you want, we can move to the next participant. What do you think?
Okay, yes.
After this session, when we clarify that if monitoring does not exist, can you hear me? Yes, we can hear you. If monitoring does not exist, it is not possible to analyze the feasibility of stocking, fish stocking. Professor Agostinho mentioned at least 4 consequences of stocking. Some of them are highly linked with the population, the interspecific and intraspecific relations. There are others that are related to the genetic health of the population and also the carrying capacity of natural systems to receive these new individuals. Stocking is a challenge for biologists, for people who have decision-making abilities to use this method to offset the fish decline. And we are not very aware of the impact and the consequences on populations. So after these words, I will give the floor to Professor Du. Is he here?
Ok, muy bien. Tenemos entonces hoy la oportunidad de
So today
conocer
we have the opportunity to get acquainted with the work of Professor Du Hao from the Institute of Fisheries, the Fisheries Research Institute from China. And so today he's going to be talking about action in terms of rescue. So Professor Du Hao is a specialist from the Yangtze River Fisheries Research Institute in China. Welcome, Professor Du Hao, and we thank you for being with us today.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, maybe good afternoon. I'm here. I'm in the early morning in China. I'm very honored here to be to give a talk at this symposium. My name is Du Hao. I come from Yangtze River Fishery Research Institute, Chinese Academy of Fishery Sciences. My topic is the threats of the dams to the large anadromous fish Chinese strategy and its rescuing actions and plans. So I would like to report on the following 3 aspects. The first one is the status of the Chinese strategy. Second is the threats of the Three Gorge Dam to the Chinese strategy. The third one is the rescuing actions and plans. As we know, the Chinese sturgeon is one of the large anadromous fish in the world. The biggest, the average body length of the Chinese sturgeon may be reach 5 meters long, and the body weight may be 500 kilograms. The Chinese sturgeon can reach 40 years old. As we can see, it's a very huge fish species. in the world. The Chinese strategy could enter most of the coastal rivers, like the Yellow Rivers, the Yangtze River, the Pearl River, the Chantang River. The Chinese strategy enter the most of the coastal rivers. Other rivers. While the living space shrank sharply with human activities in the past 3 decades. The Pearl River populations was recorded in the last record in the Pearl River is 1996, and after the year 2000, only the Yangtze River populations was left. One of the reasons is the construction of the Gezoba Dam. It's located in the middle of the Yangtze River. After the construction of the Gezoba Dam in 1961, almost all the historical spawning ground was lost. The historical spawning ground is about 600 kilometers long in the upper Yangtze River, and there are 20 more spawning sites. But after the construction of the Gezoba Dam, there are only left one spawning site below the Gezoba Dam. It's occupy only 4 kilometers long. That causes serious conditions that the Chinese population in the Yangtze River declined dramatically. As we know, the estimated border loss on the spawning ground in the history spawning site is about 10,000 individuals on the history spawning ground. While after the construction of the Gezoba Dam at the beginning of the first several years, it's about 2,000 individuals, and the population declined dramatically. And now it's only less than 20 individuals will come back to the spawning ground downstream of the Gezoba Dam. It's very serious for the population. The most worst thing is that the natural spawning activities of the Chinese strategy was broke off. In 2013. There is no any spawning activities downstream of the Gezoba Dam. It's the first time the spawning activities of the Chinese strategy was ceased. And the second, is any
Sorry, you can continue. You can continue.
Oh, okay. The second spawning break is in 2015. I don't know. It's very worse that there it is already 5 continuous years, there is no any spawning activities for the Chinese sturgeon. So how does this happen? The threat of the Three Gorge Dam dams has took the serious consequence to the Chinese sturgeon. So we think the Three Gorge Dam may be the straw that breaks the camera's back. So we will compare the Gozba Dam and the Three Gorge Dam because they are the two different type of hydropowers that may bring the different consequences to the Chinese sturgeon. The Three Gorge Dam was the world's largest power station, and it formed the 600 kilometers length reservoir, which contains 40 billions cubic meters water. That is the main reason it take to the effect on the river, because the Gozba Dam is a very small dam. It's a range of hydropower plant. That means it's only contained 1.5 billion cubic meters water, and the water just passing by the reservoir and have little effect on the water regimes on the Yangtze River. So when the Three Gorge Dams contract, the Three Gorges Reservoir have altered the water temperature regimes downstream the dam. As we know, the spawning of the Chinese sturgeon was in the autumn from October to November, and the water temperature for the Chinese sturgeon is 16 to 20. In the autumn, when the Three Gorge Reservoir formed, the decrease of the temperature was prolonged 20 to 40 days after the reservoir was formed. And we also have observed that the spawning date of the Chinese sturgeon delayed 40 to 60 days. Before we can see before 2000, most spawning activities of Chinese sturgeon will happen in October, and now till after December, the spawning just happened. One reason we can another reason we can see that the discharge of the clean water from the reservoir caused the degradation of the riverbed habitat. Here we show some photos, the underwater photos that are taken from the spawning ground, and we can see that before the construction of the Three Gorge Dam, there are still many sand in the special rooms of the pebble and cobbles. While after the construction of the Three Gorge Dam, the clean water have crushed the sand far away. That make the interspecial spaces of the cobras was very large. And we also have observed the egress, the Chinese sturgeon egress and amphibious was sticked between the cobra and the gravers, and with the enlarged interspace rooms of the cobras and the gravers, the egress, we can see the egress was it is the egress of the Chinese sturgeon, and it is stick on the interspace of the cobra and the gravers. And we can see with the enlarge of the rooms between the cobras, the embryos and egress was sticked in a ball in the rooms. It's very bad for the development of the embryos. Embryos. And we also find the hardness and the roughness of the spawning bottoms was also changed greatly. That may be the degradation of the habitat for the Chinese sturgeon for spawning. So our situations make the Chinese sturgeons very vulnerable to the wind vulnerable, and some researchers have predicted that the Chinese sturgeon will be extinct in the next 10 to 20 years if we are taking effective measures. And they think the main threat to the Yangtze River before the construction of the Gazuba Dam is the over-harvesting. And after that, before the construction of the Three Gorge Dam, is the capacity of the spawning ground. And after the Three Gorge Dam, the Canada development was affected by the water temperature, is the main reason that caused the cease of the spawning activities. So how to rescue the Chinese sturgeon? Chinese government have put some actions and plans. One of the actions may be the Yangtze River protection has received unprecedented attention. President Xi have some talks on how to save the Yangtze River environment. He said that we must take the long-term interests of the Chinese nations into account, put restoration the ecological environment of the Yangtze River at a dominant operation, make all out efforts to protect it, and forbid the large-scale development of the river. And now, the Chinese first river law, the Yangtze River protection law, has already taken effect on March the 1st, 2021. It's a good political environment for saving the Chinese sturgeon. And toughness actions, we must mention that a 10-year fishing ban was officially begins in Chinese Yangtze River since 2015. 29. About 228 fishermen and 110,000 boats was quit the Yangtze River. So it's a big actions for saving the whole Yangtze ecosystem. And we also have set the national actions for action plans for rescuing the Chinese sturgeon, and it was issued in 2015. The framework of actions including the in situ conservations, ex situ conservations, and genetic resources conservations, and some other political supporting actions. We are mentioning that the Chinese sturgeon captive breedings have made great progress. In the whole country, we have stocked 3,000 broad stocks in different kind of captive tanks, and the complete artificial propagation with the first filler generations was successed in 2009, and we also the second follicular generation journalists could have produced more than 100,000 each year since 2018. And the Chinese sturgeon's stock enhancement already improved. Before the captivity techniques broke, we have released more than 500 5 million larvas of the Chinese sturgeon into the Yangtze River. Before the complete propagation, the whole propagation was success. We also released some fingerlings and juveniles, some sub-adults and adults. After the complete artificial propagation was realized, and all the wider broad stocks captures was stopped from 2008, and know about the second follicular generations, fingerlings and juveniles, and some sub-adults, and was released in the Yangtze River. Many support was made to enhance the Chinese sturgeon stocking, and in 2021, 350,000 fingerlings and juveniles were restocked in the Yangtze River, and also include some subadults and adults. Another plans to rescue in the Chinese sturgeon is establishing the semi-natural captive stations for Chinese sturgeon to covering their whole life history, because almost all the captive Chinese sturgeon was raised in the captive tanks, and they need some semi-natural environment to improve their physical development and improve their quality of the sperm and ovary, and also need improve their ecological adaptations after they release to the Yangtze River. So we will establish some net cages in the Three Gorges Reservoir in future, and there are breeding center already have built in the middle Yangtze River, and we also use some old Yangtze River to form the semi-natural releasing centers for the Chinese sturgeon to back to the Yangtze River. And then importantly, we will establish some offshore fenced farming large areas farming center for the Chinese sturgeon to stay in their seawater areas. And we also trying to simulate the spawning ground in the artificial tanks to mimic the natural spawning of the Chinese sturgeon. We have built the huge tanks. It's about 15 meters wide, and the whole length is about 200 meters, and the depth is about 4.5 meters in depth, and we will mimic the bottom terrain and hydraulic calculators and hydraulic parameters to test how to induce the Chinese sturgeon to spawn in the artificial tanks, and it will have to do some researches for restoration and reconstructing the spawning ground on below the Gazoba Dam, and we want to use some we want to reflect the bottom terrain of the spawning ground and do some ecological regulations of the Three Gorges Dam to make the water flow fit for the Chinese sturgeon to spawn. And another important thing is trying to do some water temperature adjustment, but it's very hard to do because the whole Three Gorges Reservoir is the same water temperature. It's very hard to do so. And another plans is we will set up the offshore marine reserve for the Chinese sturgeon, and because the research is along the offshore and how the distribute and migration of the Chinese sturgeon in the sea is not very clear. so the next research might be focused on the conservation of the stocks of the Chinese sturgeon in the sea. Okay, I'm also very not good at English speaking. So thank you all for your attentions, and I will mention thanks to Dr. Zhu to invite me to this symposium to give a smart talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Duhao, for your presentation. It was very useful for us knowing about knowing and learning about such an emblematic fish for the Chinese people. So we thank you. Also, we thank you because now in China it's Saturday and you enter here at 4 o'clock in the morning. So thanks really for your effort. We got a question here in the chat, which is, we see that some of the management or the management done for this species was to ban fishery for 10 years. So we would like to know what employment or income alternatives were given to the fishermen who left the fishing industry in that region. Could you tell us a little about that? Thank you.
Okay, the fishermen and their boats was removed from the Yangtze River, and the Chinese government will help them to find other jobs to set up their lives. And some of the fishermen was becoming as a gardener of the gardener of the Yangtze River. Some of the fishermen was still left in the Yangtze River to be a assistant for the Chinese government to souvenir the whole Yangtze River, and they find if there any others was fishing. If they find them, they will be rewarded by the Chinese government. So the whole fisherman was mostly already set up and find their new jobs, and they also most of the fishermen also was transformed to fish farmers, and the Chinese government give them some field for aquaculture, and we are training them and help them to adapt to the new situation, and that's all.
Thank you, Duhao. One final question. What is your expectations about these management plans done for this species and doing stocking and trouble with this ban? Do you think we could have we can expect a good response of this management strategy? Thank you.
Oh yeah, yes. It is very worse situations for the Chinese sturgeon to survive in the future. All the efforts we have done is trying to rescue this species, but we must know that the huge dams have already break their spawning habitat, it's very hard to restore recover the spawning sites. Even we do some efforts to release the more Chinese sturgeon in the nature, but I think the Chinese government will took some actions. Maybe with the first things, maybe we need we need stock the Chinese sturgeons in a kind of level, so that the populations will sustained in the nature. There are the first thing I think is to maintain the Chinese sturgeon, maintain the Chinese sturgeon in the river and back to a large size of population. The second thing, maybe we need make some regulations of the Three Gorge Dam and the Kazuba Dam, and some researchers also suggest we can add the water from some other reservoirs to the Yangtze River to help the Chinese sturgeon to spawning. And I think it is possible to rebuild the spawning sites for the Chinese sturgeon. And the first thing I think is to restocking the Chinese sturgeon and hope them to back to a large size population.
Thank you, Dr. Duhao. We appreciate being here and enjoy your weekend.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Howe. It was very interesting to see your experience and see the change that was created in the Chinese sturgeon population, and also the management strategies to preserve it. Have a great day. We will resume the session. We have the pleasure to hear the talk about fish genetics and the implications in stocking programs. This talk will be given by Edna Márquez and Natalia Restrepo from Universidad Nacional de Colombia. Natalia is here with us. She is a biological engineer. She is a doctor in biotechnology from National University of Colombia. And she is been studying indigenous species. She's also conducted geometric morphometry studies and social genetics. We will give the floor to Natalia so she can start presenting her talk and the progress that her research group has achieved. I will be talking about what we've achieved here. It is highly related to stocking. We've been developing biological markers, and they have been tested in a natural population, specifically for the Cauca River. As an introduction, genetic diversity of fish and of any species will be driven by several aspects. Some will increase it and some will decrease it. The forces that can increase diversity include mutation, sexual reproduction, genic flow, which allows an exchange among different between different populations and the balancing selection. But one of the forces that produces reduction is the genetic drift. If we have a low number of rootstock, they can be done with a small size of the population, or we can see this as inbreeding due to different reproductive success, or when there is an unequal proportion of sex. And the different bottlenecks that can be created either by internal or external events that will lead to immediate loss of allies. In our case, and Professor Agostinho already showed the types of stocking that we have in the case of Colombia, according to the authority that regulates fisheries and aquaculture. Stocking is defined as the introduction in a natural media of species of fish that have been produced or that have been bred in captivity. The main goals are to ensure the species diversity, keep or recover food security. So we're talking about stocking that is related to maintenance of the fish resources. As it was mentioned before, there are different threats linked to stocking, such as the introduction of exotic species, introgression, dissemination of pathogens and parasites, domestication, loss of genetic variability, which can be seen due to genetic drift, inbreeding, selection, bottlenecks. Just a few species are left, or a few individuals are left, and they start to observe a decline. There can also be a decline in the number of individuals in the population, and also some depressions in terms of breeding. Reviewing some press releases and documents on stockings are not public. If we review these press releases, we've seen there are 3 species that have been stocked more in Colombia. One of the most representative ones is Prochylarus magdaleno, or Boca Chico. We've been trying to stock this species for around 3 years, and it's around 28 million fingerlings. And I think this is an understatement. In the case of Boca Chico, Prochylarus magdalene, testing the different markers or the satellites that were tested in the population. Here we see the basins. This is the map of Colombia. We sampled and analyzed individuals of different basins, Sinú, Magdalena, and Atrato. And we found that here, where we see the Cauca Magdalena Basin, we can see the orange part. This is a population that is completely different. 8 out of the 11 individuals showed some type of selection. So this orange part belongs to these 3 points that we can see here. They are in the same basin, but the structural difference is larger among these 3 points. So when my colleagues, or when we found this patch, we were wondering if there could be a problem related to the introduction of another species. Maybe due to a problem. Historically, these 3 points have had these issues of stocking. So we used a mitochondrial measurement to check if there was another species introduced. So here in red, you can see the individuals that are part of the stock that is different. It is Prochylotus. But the thing is that we weren't able to discern if there is a contamination with another type of Prochylotus. The resolution wasn't very good, but we can conclude that there are no other species of Prochylotus. So once we found that the genetic group was completely different, we were able to see that we have 2 genetic stocks that coexist. And this is for the population in the Atrato River, and this is for the Sinu River. And we can see the uniformity. In year 2020, there was another analysis of the natural populations and of other individuals in the fisheries where the fish hatcheries that feed these stocking processes. And we can see in light blue, these are the natural populations that require supplementation or enhancement in terms of stocking. And we can also see the fish hatcheries. This is the heterozygosity that was expected. We can see a big difference between the patterns in the fish hatcheries that are going to feed the stock of these species. When we take a look at the inbreeding indices, we see the fish hatcheries that have a very high index of inbreeding versus the natural environments. So the inbreeding indices are greater than 10%. So they produce or they lead to a loss that can reduce the fitness of the population. And these fish hatcheries present the same deficit. And very quickly, let me tell you about what we have as a baseline for these populations in Magdalena and Cauca. In the last review, during the last review, after conducting some structure and diversity studies, there have been 34 works. They are still very fragmented. All the studies are focused on those species that are interesting. for fish purposes. And in some cases, the works cannot be compared over time. So we don't know if some sort of enhancement process or an outer process that can affect the population will affect it because we cannot measure the results. And this is what we found after conducting the review. Even though there are some deficits, there is a good diversity compared to neotropic species. So based on the last review that was conducted, we have some average values for neotropic fish. This is the group for catfish, and this is tilapia. As you can see, the red line is the average value for neotropic fish, and bracken is different from the average, but it also behaves in the same manner as the congeners. As you can see, we have some species that have high levels of inbreeding, and we see other species where inbreeding is not as high. And even though we should pay attention to the monitoring activities, they do not have a red flag, and we have to pay attention to them. However, the levels are not very high. Let me show you the Boca Chico or the Brachylotus magdalenae. We're working with some natural populations and some fish hatcheries that were stocked. Here we can see some estimates. We have 2 genetic stocks that coexist. The diversity is okay. This is the natural population, and these are the possible stocks of the fish hatcheries that can supplement them at any time. These are the inbreeding levels. This is the natural environment, and these are the stocks, the genetic stocks of what we see at fish hatcheries. They're very similar. And we also have another number to see what is the number of individuals that can include alleles in the next generation. And very briefly, the other species are showing in the baseline similar behaviors. Some of them have very high values of of effective population number and the inbreeding indices, but they're not, they do not worry as much. But we need to pay close attention to these species. And what's interesting here, unlike the other species that are showing, at least in the field that we are studying, genetic groups that coexist, this bracken henny is showing a structure. So in every single site where we sample these species, populations are completely different. So in case this species requires stocking and supplementation, it is not recommended in order to avoid introgression and contamination. So it is necessary to deal with the genetic group as a unit.
So from a genetic standpoint, the biggest consideration or the aspects to take into account, if we're going to have a physical in terms of everything needed for the restocking processes, we need a taxonomic identity. If it's not clear, that's an issue. The population structure, like I showed you for the bracken case, what's the diversity that we're going to bring to the to these areas? The considerations for a restocking, I think Professor Agustin this was pretty much a summary of his work as well as from other works. He presented these better than me, so here's where I end. Thank you very much. Thank you, Edna and Natalia, for providing this genetic perspective about restocking. We have some questions from the audience. So the first one is for Paulo. You can turn on your mic, please. Thank you, Natalia, for your presentation. So interesting. It's clear that it's important to understand the genetic structure of the populations before having any type of restocking. I wonder if it's also important not only to understand the impact of restocking, but also if you have a restocking before knowing the genetic structure, because we're going to destroy the whole structure. We're missing the opportunity to know the history of our populations, of our stocks. So we're not only causing a damage, but we're not taking advantage of the opportunity to use the knowledge that could be so useful for this restocking. Yes, I believe that in order to know a natural behavior before any intervention is really important, not only to measure the impact that we'll have, but also because there are some questions or features that are specific to the species that will lose only by including our manipulation. So we're gonna fix certain alleles or behaviors because that's what we feel is right, but not because we have the knowledge to do it. Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. So interesting. My question is similar to what Paulo stated, and is related to the fact that we need to recognize the baseline situation before restocking. But my question is, if you want to do a restocking from a pisciculture standpoint, I suppose it's always expected for the genetic diversity to be lower than the diversity that you see in the medium. So it is good to have fish from pisciculture to the medium. And the second thing is that we have the concept of significant evolutionary lines in order to know what the population groups are, to have a greater consideration for the conservation. Yes, we're doing that, and we're also using genetic stocks, which are the differentiated groups for many of the species that we're studying right now in the natural populations, the natural stocks. We have two stocks that don't coexist. We're working with migratory species. It's still not clear for us, but we need to see reproductive studies, behavior, and spawning grounds to be able to know why we have these two groups, and if these two groups can be mixed, if they're mixing naturally, how to manage that. Because we can supplement or restock with one stock, but then we would lose all the information from the other stock. So if we don't have that knowledge and we don't take into account that concept, we could be changing the stock structure in these restocking processes. Thank you, Natalia. So we're gonna proceed with our next guest with the presentation of Professor Luz. Luz, you have the floor. Thank you. Thank you, Hector. We continue our talks with the presentation regarding restocking activities in the Magdalena River basin, with an emphasis in the mid basin. We have today with us Dr. Yonny Andres Yepez and Dr. Jorge Luis Aristizabal. Dr. Yonny Yepez is has a master's degree and a PhD from the University of Antioquia. He did a postdoctoral degree in fish genomics, and he's the director of the research group IPEM. Dr. Jorge Luis Aristizabal has a degree in aquaculture. He's a coordinator of the production and projects of the physical San Silvestre, professor of the La Paz Institute in Barranquilla, and specialist in native species of the Magdalena River Basin. And he's also worked on the improving of the water resource in the same basin. So let's give the floor to Professors Drs. Yepez and Aristizabal for them to be with us. You're going to present from that area? Okay. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that you can project from your computers.
Bueno, muchas gracias. Pues vamos a hablar en este momento un poco
we're going to talk today about our experiences in the San Silvestre physical in the Magdalena River, specifically in the mid-basin of this river. As we all know, Colombia is considered one of the most biodiverse countries on earth. We are in second place in terms of fish diversity. And that diversity is represented in 5 big geographic basins, one of them being the Magdalena-Cauca Basin, very important from a social, cultural, and economic standpoint, because more than 77% of the country's population live alongside this basin, and more than 80% of our GDP is produced there, 70% of the hydraulic power, 70% of agricultural crops, 90% of coffee, and about 50% of the fishing in the country. We've specialized in the mid-basin of this river, and we focused on a situation that is particular to the region because it depends from a social and economic standpoint in our artisanal fishing, and this contributes in a great degree to food security. And we've seen an issue with food security in the last years, not only in terms of violence, migration of fishermen and communities to the big cities, but also indirectly, the population has been affected by the great decrease in fishing resources. Here's a small graph of statistics in the last 40 years, where we see a strong decline from 1975 to 2019 of 82% in the fishing production in the Magdalena Basin. And this is related to the use of the soils, natural resources, the indiscriminate dumping of industrial wastes and other types of wastes, loss of connectivity. A lot of our bodies of water have lost connectivity. So because there's been a greater use of agriculture and for livestock, the illegal fishing, where they don't distinguish between species and sizes, different types of size, and also with the construction of infrastructure and and hydropower constructions. So these are some of the biggest challenges of the communities that we take into account here. So we have a crisis of resources, of hydrobiotic resources in Colombia. which have led to environmental and social consequences. We see some statistics from DANE where they talk about 1.5 million people that live from fishing, with close to 150,000 artisanal fishermen who live from this activity. Like I said before, this has led to the migration to territories, the abandonment of some of these areas, due in part to the little opportunities from the government and to lack of food security. Another situation in the Mid-Magdalena from 2013, strong environmental issues due to the crisis with the species that are threatened, 26 birds, 15 mammals, 28 fish species, and 21 flora species. So this has led to strong issues. In terms of the fish, the stocking has been seen in the last years as a tool, as an alternative for the sustainability of the fish resource, fish resource. And this has been done in the last years in an irresponsible manner, with experiences that began 40 or 50 years ago, with the use of fish known as bream, and then stocking from one basin to the other. Back then, we didn't have the knowledge that we're acquiring today, but the stocking activity, this responsible stocking activity, the way we've interpreted it in the San Silvestre Piscicola, has led to improving the situation of the communities that live from this basin. And this also contributes to the maintenance of tourist and food sector at the local level, so that these communities can maintain themselves. This is funded by government agencies, the mining and power sector as well, regulated by the National Authority of Agriculture and Fishing, which has carried out strong efforts in the last years to control and to try to regulate these sites that had been so arbitrary. And there are very few sites that actually comply with the regulations from the authority regarding the use of these areas. And this has led to the development of activities that make more sense when it comes to stocking. In our case, our entity has led to more than 100 stream areas that have been stocked. More than 100% of the reproductions have been with the Boca Chico fish. This is activity that has relied on the participation of the community, including children, to try to generate a sense of belonging, to contribute to the management and the conservation of the resource in the nation. Some activities that we've had in this stocking activity, the identification based on information from NGOs, entities, and community, identifying wetlands. Not all wetlands comply with these conditions, so we gotta take into account conditions that are special, such as the connectivity of the streams and processes of socialization and sensibilization, a better management of fishing so that the fishing is sustainable. In general terms, we're conscious that the stocking is not the solution to the problem. We need a greater intervention from the government as well as from other entities so that we can start restoring the natural conditions of our wetlands so that we can contribute to a natural process of stocking in the countries so that the fishing and the fish themselves are fundamental to our economics. That's why we're conscious and we're working on this front. And this has led not only to sustain the business, but also to generate or to get involved more with science and involving science in this process. That's why we created a research group. Today, we are a group A as classified by the Ministry of Science, and we have 5 main research lines. I believe this is one of the greatest, biggest pillars that identify us and that separate us from the other fish hatcheries that were involved in science in the process. And we're not only taking the alluvials to the wetland, we're involved in the social part, social area, and we're also involved in research into these processes. Well, thank you very much for your attention. Thank you, Yonny, for your presentation. We have time for one question. Okay, Luz has a question. Have you considered within your analysis and the studies that you've conducted alternatives to monitor the stocking that's been carried out at the hatchery? Yes, as a matter of fact, about some years ago, the national authority had, in the resolution 2837, contemplated that type of monitoring from companies. Unfortunately, when we started calculating the cost of that monitoring, it didn't comply with, it wasn't in line with what the companies were willing to pay. At the research group, we started to look at different ways and methods to start monitoring, because if we don't monitor, the best way to determine if a stocking process has the effect we want is by having a follow-up and by monitoring. It should be an ongoing process, and it's one topic that we have to focus on so that it has the effect that we all want for the environment and for the community.
Muchas gracias, Yonny. Con esto cerramos.
Thank you, Yonny. With this, we've finished your participation, and we move on to our next guest, Dr. Evelyn.
Dr. Evelyn will be talking about her work that asks if fish stocking is necessary in Chile. Dr. Evelyn is a biologist. She specializes, she is also a professor in the Concepcion University. She specializes in Andean rivers ecology, and currently she is working on projects to restore and protect fish in the face of the challenges that the Andean rivers are facing. The floor is yours. Thank you so much, Luz. It has been very interesting to be able to hear all these presentations, especially the one provided by Professor Agostinho. I think he said very important things about stocking. Again, I will be talking about the Chilean case, which is very different from the tropical systems that we have already seen. Specifically, I want to show what we are doing regarding fish stocking. And this is why I asked this question. Are there necessary fish stockings? There are two main goals in Chile. The first one is regarding to sport fisheries, and the second one, conservation. The second one is conservation. Let me start talking about the sport fisheries. As you can see here on this slide, the species that support sport fishing in Chile, which is an important economic activity, especially in the southern area, in the Patagonia area. The economy is based on species that have been introduced. The main species are rainbow trout, brown trout. There's a couple of native species, the Chilean silver side and the perch, but they are not highly desired by fishermen. However, these species that support sports fishing are not only introduced, but also considered as invasive species. They are highly abundant along the rivers and lakes, including the northern areas and the southern areas. These species are protected by the law, and this law states that the fishing should be catch and release only. And this is valid even for protected areas. The problem that we have, or the contradiction, is that these two species, which are the most abundant one and the most important for sport fishing, are declared among the 100 worst invasive species, alien species. So they're causing an imbalance in our ecosystem. Additionally, this has also led to some management contradictions in Chile. They don't look very pretty. For instance, the case of the rainbow trout, on one side we have the Ministry of Environment, and this species is considered an invasive species that is harmful. So there are some indications that tell us that we need to work to eradicate and control this type of population. And on the other side, we have the Ministry of Economy and Tourism Development, and they consider this species as a valuable resource. Therefore, it should be protected and stocked. And this happens in the same state. Now, the law that protects this is the recreational fisheries laws, and they make a difference between repopulation and seeding. So repopulation is when a hydrobiological species is introduced to a body of water in which they are or have been previously found with the purpose of increasing or reestablishing original populations. And seeding is just species not naturally present in that area. This is why we see on the news these journeys or these sessions to conduct fish stocking in Rio Bueno and in other areas. So all these things are absurd. I also found this paper that was published on July 25th where there is an assessment, an environmental risk assessment of non-native salmonid species. And we also have aquaculture of these non-native salmons that escape frequently. And these reports say that during the past 10 years, more than 3.8 million salmon have been reported as escaped. That's what has been told. I bet they have, I mean, the figures are even higher. And the species we're talking about are the coho salmon and the rainbow trout. So we have a double problem here. The conclusion here is that for sport fisheries, the invasive species are used, and these species are very harmful for ecosystems. And for conservation purposes, we consider native species. This has been shown before. The Chilean endemic species have a high index of endemism compared to an individual like this one. They cannot compete. This is an example of the hydropower plant that was built in the Biobío River, and this was flooded in 2014. This area, therefore, the rivers that were here were transformed into a dam. As Professor Agostinho was showing before, these fish assemblages in the river systems are completely different from the ones found at the reservoir. This is what we usually have in central areas, such as the site that was flooded, and it changes completely. That is dominated by native species. However, they are not the expected ones. So the question is, what should be stopped? And what are the places that need to be stocked with the river assemblage? So we see the emergence of these programs that aim at rescuing and relocating development and relocating these species. But the problem is, and this is something that we've talked about before, we have discussed before. So where should the fish stocking do? Where should the fish stocking be done? From where should we get the individuals to do the stocking? What is the carrying capacity that those habitats have? What are the genetic considerations? So we need to ask ourselves all these questions before moving to a stocking strategy. We don't have fish hatchery systems because they do not have a commercial value. This is why this technology hasn't been developed yet. This is an experimental center that we had through a compensation measure of a hydropower plant, how to get the eggs, and then we achieved the larvae. We were trying to breed them, but not with stocking purposes, but the idea was to get the technology so we could read them in case of an emergency, because there are some species that are endemic from one single basin. So in case of an emergency, we wanted to have an alternative to do the stocking. As a conclusion, for conservation purposes, we know that native species are desirable. They need to be analyzed, and I would agree with a stocking program that is based on scientific knowledge, which is what we are lacking currently. On the other hand, from the scientific point of view and the conservation point of view, the stocking with invasive species is not recommended, even though there could be an argument that the sports fisheries are necessary as a livelihood. It is also true that this population is self-sustainable and highly abundant. Therefore, restocking is not required. This is basically what I wanted to talk about. Thank you so much.
Gracias, Evelyn, por ilustrarnos el
Thank you so
contexto.
much, Evelyn, for giving us an overview about the Chilean context. Now I will give the floor to Professor Luz to moderate the following questions and to proceed with the closing remarks. We would like to know if there is a question for Professor Evelyn.
Evelyn, gracias por su presentación.
Thank you so much for your presentation, Professor Evelyn. Okay. Thank you so much for your presentation, Evelyn. I think the challenge is huge in Chile because we do the same in Brazil. We introduce invasive species to support sports fishing. But in Brazil, we do have native species that can be used for sports fishing. But I see that in Chile, I think it's difficult. How can you convince population or the communities to keep these species? Because I think people are more concerned with what they do than with biodiversity. So it is a very big challenge. How do you address it? I see it in a pessimistic manner, and I mainly when we start working with indigenous populations or indigenous people, and we start to ask them how valuable fish were, and they don't even know them. Or first, they thought that salmons were an indigenous species, and they were more familiar with catfish, and they said that those fish were ugly, that they even feared them, but that maybe they could eat them. So it's a huge challenge. I also think that there's no possibility to eradicate the salmon fishing. I think we can control it, but I think we need to educate people about the importance of having this endemic species and achieve coexistence. That's all we can do. And based on the experiences that we've had in terms of management strategies, I agree that this is a great challenge, a huge challenge. Thank you. Thank you so much, Evelyn. And due to time constraints, we will give the floor to Professor Luz so she can give us the closing remarks. Thank you so much, Hector. This afternoon, we were able to see the different positions or perspectives regarding stocking. We started with a lecture where Professor Angelo mentioned all the conditions to make a decision for fish stocking, also the consequences and the possibilities to do it properly. Then we learned about the work that is being done in China, where they decided to protect the Yangtze River, and they conducted a campaign about the breeding of the Chinese sturgeon and the recovery of the spawning grounds. Finally, we heard the perspective from the genetic point of view of the threat and the concern to keep the stockings that are being done inadequately and the consequences of past stockings. Then we heard something about a fish hatchery that conducts stocking, and they are also putting their effort to improve their stocking attempts. They're doing some research to improve these procedures. It's very important to keep in mind the monitoring and who should be paying for the monitoring, so they do not, so they are not paid by these fish hatcheries. And finally, we heard about the perspective of Chile, and we also hear that this is disadvantages because these species can be harmful for the ecosystem. So with these conclusions, today we can close our symposium. We want you to make some reflections about this 3-day work. We will be sending you a form to hear about your opinions, if there were some topics that we did not consider, so we can continue with the SHAASAN strategy. So now we want to thank again all the companies that funded this event, all the organizing institutions, all the universities that participated, and thank you all for facilitating this event. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge, your experience and expertise, and I hope to see you soon. And congratulations, everybody.
Muy bien, gracias.